guys, welcome to Random Musings with Shali, where we normally talk about Bible characters. Today we're going to be looking at another Bible character, and guess who? Haman. Yes, we're going to be looking at the story of Haman, which can be found in the Book of Esther, chapter 3 down to chapter 7. We're going to be looking at Haman's behavior. We're going to be looking at what he could have done better. We're also going to be looking at how his behavior connects to today's world, our systems, our attitude, the challenges that we face. And we're also going to be looking at lessons that we can learn from Haman's behavior. Stay tuned and stay blessed. A peep into the story. King Xerxes promoted Haman and placed his seat above all the princes within his kingdom. He also instructed that people should pay homage to Haman because he was like his right hand. Anyways, the king's servants at the king's gate would pay homage to Haman anytime he passed by, except Mordecai. After a while, the king's servant would meet Mordecai and ask, "Guy, why are you not bowing down to Haman? What's the problem?" And then Haman said, he's a Jew and that was against his belief. After a while, these people reported Mordecai to Haman, and Haman was like, "What? I have to see this for myself." Then one day, Haman was passing by. Every other person paid homage to him except this man, Mordecai. And this infuriated Haman, up until the point that Haman had to dig into his lineage to find out who Mordecai was, and he was upset with his whole generation, his whole lineage, his whole, all of the Jews. Then Haman went to the king and said to him that there are certain people scattered within all the provinces in your kingdom, that they have their own separate laws and they don't keep to the king's law. And he even said that the king should make a decree to destroy these people because they are not fit to remain within the kingdom. And he's going to personally pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those that will do the work. And then the king said, this is a good idea. Go ahead. I back you up. Let that decree be made. In summary, everyone learnt of the king's decree, including Mordecai and all of the Jews. And of course, there was great mourning amongst them. They were really upset. And not just that, word eventually got out to Esther, and she told Mordecai and to conduct a 3 days fast amongst all of the Jews, so that she would find favor in the presence of the king to table the matter. Then the king asked Esther what she wanted, what her petition was. And Esther said she wanted Haman to be present for a banquet which she had prepared for the king. So they had the first banquet. And then after the first banquet, Haman went home, was bragging amongst his friends and wife to say that, he has been promoted. He has so many riches. He's highly respected amongst all the other princes within the kingdom. But one thing was still making him unhappy: Mordecai. And then when his friends and his wife heard about that, they said, "Well, why not prepare a 50 cubit gallows and throw Mordecai and let Mordecai be hanged in there?" And he said, "Good idea." And then he went ahead and told his servants to prepare the gallows. In between all of this, the king couldn't sleep. And then at some point, the king said, "Bring the chronicle books. Let it be read to me." And they found out that there was a favor that Mordecai had done to the king, and he wasn't rewarded for it. And the king said, "Oh, who is around to give me some advice on what can be done to reward this guy for his goodness?" And they said, Haman is still around. And then they called Haman. And then Haman said, "It's me that the king wants to reward. Who else again?" And Haman said, the king said, what should be done for whom the king delights in?" And Haman said, "Let them do this, let them do that, let them do all of this." And the king said, "Exactly as you have said. Go and do all these things that you have listed for a guy named Mordecai." When Haman heard Mordecai, his head just sparked again and said, "What?" But because he's the king, he had to obey. So he did all that again. By the time he got home, he was double infuriated, not knowing what was even coming his way. Later that evening again, he went for the second banquet that the queen had prepared for himself and the king. And it was there that yam pepper scatter happened again. Eventually, the king got to know that Haman was the one behind, that wanted to kill even his wife Esther. And at some point, even whilst he was trying to beg the queen, Haman said, "Oh, you still want to be molesting my wife right in my presence. So he commanded that Haman be killed and all of his family members was thrown into the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. That's just a summary of the story. If you'd like to really get more details, please read Esther chapter 3 down to chapter 7. What could have been going through Haman's mind through all this scenario? I would think, number one, Mordecai must have given him sleepless nights for him to be thinking this way. He must have had lots of sleepless nights. And two, I think he must have been thinking, how dare Mordecai, how dare this guy, who is he? What does he have? What's backing him up? And I think his joy must have been stolen, because with all the riches he had, he was still unhappy because of just one man, Mordecai. And I think also he must have been thinking, I'm going to show this guy who the boss is. He's going to know. Oh my God, man. Now, let's go to what I think Haman could have done better. Personally, I think Haman could have managed his ego well. Respect is not forced, it's earned. He didn't manage his ego well. He let that ego override his decisions and his actions. Secondly, I think he could have also called Mordecai, to address that situation one-on-one, just to understand Mordecai's perspective, what was going through Mordecai's mind, why he was defiant towards him, because that was the way he saw it. So he could have called Mordecai one-on-one to find out what was going on. Thirdly, his rage with Mordecai was personal, and then it turned a personal vendetta to a national project. Because of one person, Mordecai was upset with just one person, and then because of him, he looked for the whole lineage, everyone connected to him, and looked for a way to destroy them. So personal vendetta became a problem of national security. Also, I think he could have chosen to also forgive and forget. He let his anger or his hatred, he let it override his decision to love, to be humble to other people. So he just let that hatred and the bitterness he had towards one person to override his actions. So he wasn't showing that he was humble. He could have been more humble towards that situation. Then lastly, for me, I think that he could have used his position, to make positive changes. He was in a position of authority, more like second in command to the king, and not just any king, a prominent king. He could have used that position to create positive influence among the nation or amongst the people, instead of trying to create a fall for one of the tribes within the provinces or within the kingdom. Now let's bring Haman's behavior, let's try to connect it to our attitude or the challenges, the systems that we see today. Number one, I think that our leaders, people, influencers, we practice what we call egocentric kind of leadership, whereby we prioritize the way people see us, we prioritize recognition, we prioritize the way we're perceived, flattery over real service, real over integrity, and bringing on real service to the world. Also, we can see that in our world today, there's abuse of power. There's abuse of political power. There's abuse of power in the office, within any sphere that some people are in, where there's authority and power, people abuse power. And also see from Haman's story that he manipulated his authority for his personal gain, just for his political gain. So abuse of power, it's really it's prominent in our world today. Looking at social media is a very good tool, but also one of the downsides to it is that it also mirrors part of Haman's behavior, where people are seeking for validation through likes, through followership and all of that, before they feel that I'm being respected, I'm being recognized. Lastly, for me, I think we can also connect Haman's behavior or the scenario around the story to what's going on in our world today regarding religious intolerance, racism, xenophobia, all those things where some sect of people will think that because they're in power, the minority sects, they can oppress them, all those things. Those are part of the things that we experience in our world today. Lessons to learn from the story of Haman. For me, when in position of power, use your position, your authority to influence people positively. Use it to birth good things. Use it to make positive impact in the life of people, not just for your family, but people around you, the society at large, and not just seeking for recognition. That's number one. Secondly, when offended, it's good to just pause, reflect, and see if you can choose dialogue over revenge. Because Haman was obviously offended by Mordecai's inactions or his supposed disdain towards his status, but he didn't address that situation. He just went out and took personal vendetta as a political, as a means of national political problem. Could also deduce from that story, from Haman's story, that he wasn't humble, and pride always comes before a fall. Humility is key and it should be placed over recognition. And lastly, for me, don't take laws into your hands when you feel like you've been offended. Let God fight for you. Imagine Haman falling, is a case of what we call ousted by his own petard. If you read Shakespeare a lot, you would know that line. Anyways, so let God fight for your battles for you. Hands it over to God. All right, that's all from me today on today's episode of Random Musing with Shali, and we've talked about the story of Haman. I hope you've learned one or two things, but more importantly, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your comments. I'd like to hear your additions, subtractions, multiplication. If any, they're all welcomed. And until next time, where we'll be looking at or discussing another Bible character, stay tuned, stay blessed, and Jesus loves you.